Oh, hi everybody. I'm back again. Um, yeah, and just wrapping up. This is going to be like the technically last two chapters, only one of them is tied with the current story, and then I'll explain the next chapter after I've done reading it. Anyway, so for those of you who are just tuning in, not seen my channel before, my name is Beth Wagner, and I'm currently reading my dad's manuscripts. Normally, I would be marking them up for editing, and I might still do some minor edits this time around, but um, I also have these extra chapters I have to merge together. So it's mostly just going to be a quick write up to see whether or not things need to change around a bit. And yeah, so then I'm also going to speak to a few things after I'm done and kind of let you guys know what I'm going to be doing after this for the next little while. But yeah, um, without further ado, though, however, let us get started on. Yeah, and if you just started, this is also chapter 20 of 20. So if you haven't heard the rest of it, please go back and listen to the other chapters first, and then come forward and listen to the final chapter here. I mean, this is recommended. Do as you will. All right. So, chapter 20 of Trollhunters. Gattersby shuddered in his saddle. By the gods of lost luck! His ruffians looked at him in surprise, but he was not going to explain things to them. He just felt the effect of powerful magic. He was suddenly aware of the hammering din of battle just ahead, just a little ahead. Come on, he shouted, kicking his horse into motion. I don't intend to watch someone else take my revenge for me. He came over the small rise, and down in the center of the clearing among the buildings, he saw the battle. He could even distinguish Dervisua down there, fighting against the men in the old-fashioned armor. The troll hunters were seriously outnumbered, too. He threw a crushing spell down on one group of attackers, and even as it took effect, put to sleep on another group of them. He saw a dark figure in the melee as well, the statue. He'd have to do something about that, too. He looked back for his men, but they were no longer following him. He shrugged. What could one expect, after all? And then that backward glance fell on a group of mounted men coming up through the trees. A moment later, he saw the sashtos in their hands and knew who they were. No time for a proper revenge. He was going to have to blast the troll hunters down and ride for Yitzgaz. He rode into the holy band, striking them down with whips of fire. I mean, the captain saw Gattersby kick his horse into motion and thought perhaps the magician had spotted them behind him. A moment later, he heard the sounds of battle. At Thuggin races and all the finned fish. He rides toward a battle? Come on, lads, let's be going. He saw Gattersby. He saw Gattersby's men disappear into the brush, and was glad not to have to bother with them. Though they didn't look to be much opposition. The Sashto men came over the hill to see the fight going on and continued riding down. Move into two ranks. On my command, one volley. Then we charge. It was it was not the sort of Sashto tactics they'd ever practiced, but this was a totally different kind of fight than they had ever fought. He considered for a moment letting the battle take its natural course, and then collecting the magician's corpse afterward. But that would still require some sort of dickering with these old-fashioned fighters. Best to go in now. He dropped to his normal position, 2 paces right and 2 back of the rear rank, from which he could keep an eye on their dressing. As he had expected, several of them let their horses go a little too much. Some held back a little bit, but with him behind, roaring at them to keep their dressing, they didn't get their ranks confused. "Aim for the fellows in the strange armor," he shouted. "Aim! Pull!" The 2 volleys of the sashtos cut through the holy band. Then Zaktor and his men were in with their swords. My throat is feeling a little bit rumbly right now, so just bear with me. Artran Artron saw Gatras Fee come riding into the holy band with his whip of fire, and thought at first that the magician had come to help them. Oh dear. He suddenly realized that Gatras Fee was probably only helping them so he could have his own revenge later. "He's helping us right now, that's what counts," he muttered as he cast another javelin of light. He did not notice the Sashto men until the sound of their weapons caught his attention. He noticed something else at the same time. The men of the holy band were beginning to waver. They were used to having protections against magic, but this time their magical protections had been removed at one stroke. The statue was among them as well, something they had only heard of, but was now they were finding just how invulnerable it was. Another magician rode into them, killing them with whips of fire, unhindered by the magical protection they once had. Some of the younger men began to flee. Gatras Fee surveyed the Trollhunters quickly. The old wizard was tired, barely able to. Oh, good. 1 second here, guys. Gatras Fee surveyed the Trollhunters quickly. The old wizard was tired, barely able to cast the occasional spell, and the young apprentice was using only javelins of light. He cast his spell, the Chain of Fire, and was shocked to see it reflected back at him. By good fortune, his own shield spell held. He took a moment to assess the spell that had reflected his spell back at him. No, it was not totally impermeable, but with his own energy so depleted, could he do it? He ground his teeth. They would escape then. His attention was drawn to the statue, still wreaking havoc among the men of the holy band who still dared to face him. He glanced at the mounted Sashto men who were coming closer. Yes, he might borrow some of the statue's power if he worked quickly. Artran saw Gatras Fee's first attack and grinned as it recoiled on him. He called up another light javelin and threw it. Saw it fade harmlessly against the magician's shields. He summoned another and sat for a moment in indecision. Then Farion shouted, "Your javelin, boy! Give it to me!" Without thinking, he tossed it to Farion and saw the old man refocus it and toss it back. No instructions, the man clearly was relying on his good sense. As Farion tossed the shaft back to him, so brilliant that it hurt his eyes, he strained to focus it, to control the wild feeling of exultant destruction that it brought, and cast it again. He closed his eyes against its radiance and cast it at Gatras Fee. He felt, rather than saw, Farion tracing a rune of protection. With his coruscating sphere flashed into momentary existence, showing where the javelin met Gatras Fee's shield. Then the somewhat weakened javelin struck its target. There was a sound that went beyond sound. a wind that blew Artran from his saddle. When he staggered to his feet again, he saw that the others, with the exception of Dirishua, had suffered likewise. She was only managing to stay in her saddle by leaning over and clutching at the saddle horn. The statue was still on its feet, but its movements were slower and jerky. The horse on which Gatra's fee had ridden was running wild and screaming, fleeing white-eyed from a terror which it could not escape. What remained of the holy band fled, running, staggering, even crawling away from something beyond their comprehension. The master and his two assistants lay dead where they stood. Their magic had reflected back at them. Then the death of Gatra's fee had been more than they could bear. It was almost more than I could bear, without Varian's rune of protection. And where was Varian? Artran's eyes found Varian, lying on the ground where he had fallen, and he picked his way across the strewn corpses on unsure feet. He dropped to his knees beside the old sorcerer, feeling for a pulse in the neck. The pulse was there, weak but present. How is he? Artran noticed a hoarse voice as that of Kellis Doe. He's alive, and with a little luck he'll stay that way. He looked around. Don't be a fool, boy! The old magician's voice was a mere whisper, but it held the commanding power of a shout. I'm finished. Don't argue. I know what I put into that last one. I can hang on for a day or so, but to what point? Come here. He laid his hands on Artran's shoulders. I'm going to cast a spell of tongues on you. It will let you read my notebooks. It will wear off after a while, so you're going to have to do some quick studying to learn enough to let you make sense of the rest. No, be quiet. I've only got one chance to get this right. So Artran was quiet while Varian spoke the spell. A strange feeling came over Artran, a refreshing coolness with a hint of stormy wildness underneath. All right, boy. The wizard's voice was weaker now, barely above a whisper. You have your inheritance. Go and use it well. Make me proud. Artran waited, listening. Then suddenly the realization came to him that Varian was dead. He rose, his thoughts in confusion. Excuse me. It was an unfamiliar voice, speaking in a deferential tone. Artran turned to face a man in the uniform of King Bemotor's Sashto troops. He was leaning on his sword with the air of a man who might just fall over without that support. The man pulled himself up by main force and stepped carefully forward. My name is Zaktor, a servant of King Bemotor. I was sent to bring back the magician Gatra's fee. What happened to him? Did he use a spell to escape? Artran looked around, then spotted a piece of charred green cloak. He was hit by a powerful spell. He pointed. There's a piece of his cloak. You might be able to find some other bits and pieces of him if you look. The king wanted us to kill him and bring him back his head as proof. Zaktor was still dazed. Artran himself was too shaken to be polite. I'm sorry, he was about to attack us. We had no time to ask the permission of King Behamor. The captain shook his head as if to clear it. No, of course not. He shook his head again. I'm sorry. Whatever that spell was, it seemed to have addled my wits. No, we have no quarrel with you. I'll take the cloak as proof, and as soon as my men are all on their feet again, we'll be gone. Artran looked around at his own group. Carnutran put his hand over Rijwa's shoulders in something more than a brotherly fashion. She stiffened for a moment, then put a hand around his waist. Rage boiled up in Artran. He stepped forward, only to be halted by a firm hand on his arm. I need to talk to you, Artran. said Callisto. But I need to talk to you, Artran. Now. Her hand was iron with an iron band on his upper arm. He let himself be led away to a spot where one corner of the building hid them from the sight of the rest of the troll hunters. She turned him to face her, released his arm, and suddenly struck him hard on the cheek with the side of her fist. He was never really unconscious, but when he began to pull himself to his elbows in preparation for sitting up, she was squatting beside him. I'm sorry, I would have used my open hand, but the sound of a slap carries too well. As it is, the rest of them will be guessing what's going on, but they can't know for certain. All he was capable of doing was muttering, What, why? You are about to make a fool of yourself, Artran. You are going to go storming over there, full of jealousy, and quite likely say something would have one or the other of you chopping you to bits. I happen to think that would be a terrible waste. But the bowl, the forecast, and fate and all? Artran, fate is a frayed bowstring to trust your life to. Ask any gambler. When winning seems the surest, when else do you lose? Consider that what those two have been through together. Would you grudge them a little happiness? He was sitting up, now feeling the side of his jaw. I should be happy then? She shook her head. Listen, young fool. How long were you a prisoner with the Holy Band, and how long were you planning your escape? And did you go around letting everyone know that if you weren't satisfied, you meant to take to your heels at the least opportunity? Yes, you should act as though you're happy for them. You'll find that as time goes on, the pretense becomes the reality. Your opinion is to break up the fellowship, have us go off in ones and twos across the land. But we've worked together too well and too long to break up at a whim. But I've been with you bare a year and a half. She shrugged. We need a magician with us, and you're all the magician we've got. Her smile took the sting out of the words. It also reminded him of Farian's legacy, resting in the magician's saddlebags. Yes, he'd spent all this time and trouble to become a magician. He was still, he had to admit, a bare apprentice. Could he learn enough and learn it soon enough from Farian's books to become more than an apprentice? And could he do to earn a living while he did so? He made himself smile. All right, if I say I'll try to be happy, will that suffice, or will you hit me again? I'll have to accept you at your word. I doubt that one could beat sense into your thick head with bare hands anyway. She stood and reached down a hand for him. Let's go back to the others. They found the others standing looking at the statue. It was an unmoving statue once more, but it held held a pose with its right fist raised, as though threatening the settlement of the Holy Band. He wondered if it was just a chance or if it meant something more. He would have to ask Farian. He realized suddenly that he would never ask Farian anything again, and sadness came over him. In order to do something, anything to push back memories, he asked, Is anyone wounded? They held a funeral for Farian, burying him on the field where he had fallen. They put up a mound over him as a warrior old who had died in battle. It began as a simple internment, but a few of the slaves who had not run away during the fighting, likely cowering in the barn for fear of the noise of magic and fighting, came out. Seeing the holy band had fled and themselves freed, they all offered to assist their liberators. No one was quite sure who had the notion of the mound first. It seemed that it just grew. When that was done, the troll hunters sat around the fire late into the night, talking about memories of the old magician, the things he had done, the difficulties he had pulling he had pulling them out of. Sorry, give me 1 second here. The things he had said, both wise and humorous. Beckel played a lament on his syrinx, a tune so moving that many of those listening were seen to wipe away a tear. It was late when they sought their beds, and the next morning they made plans to move on. They made their way out of the territory of the. Oh, they made their way out of the territory of the Holy Band. Leadership seemed to devolve upon Pothor and Carnutran, who appeared to take matters in turn. They kept a careful watch, as Carnutran said. Those fellows were just scattered, not killed. Some of them may come back. They discussed their future during the evenings. I just wonder, Beckel said, if all the troubles we've been through are not a sign that we ought to be doing something different rather than continuing to hunt trolls. On the other hand, suggested Artran, perhaps we ought to consider this merely as a reason for continuing. Bah! Signs and wonders, Callisto scoffed. The main sign I consider is how slender our wallets are. And at the moment, I must tell you, my own wallet is dreadful thin. So I ask of you, if we're not to go to hunting trolls for a living, what are we to do? What have you to say, Carnutran? Asked Beckel. The warrior shrugged. One thing is as good as another to me, though I think we ought to take careful heed of what Callisto says. And you, Derishua? I'm rather new to all this, but I'll go with Carnutran. And we've had a pretty fair luck of getting out of the troubles we've fallen into. I take that as a good sign, if it's a sign at all. Hmm. If you will all remember, I did not say these things were signs, just that I wondered if they might be. I would only say that we should be careful just what we leap into. Callisto spoke up again a little more mildly than before. And neither did I mean we should fling ourselves into whatever project comes up. Only that we ought not to cut ourselves off before. Okay, good gravy. Hold on here. Only that we ought not to cut ourselves off before time doing any particular. Oh my, what? Sorry, really, really hard to read what this is. I'm going to say the words, and they will not make sense. Only that we ought to not cut ourselves off before time from doing any particular thing that might come up. So it went. They came until to the main road, which led to Finich. It was late in the afternoon, still time for a little more traveling, if they could decide. Let's try this one more time. So it went until they came to the main road, which led to Finich. It was late in the afternoon, still time for a little more traveling, if only they could decide which way to go. Suggesting am, said Pothar, that we camping here beat overnight. and making up our minds be as to what we will doing be. No one had any objection to that, so they set about making camp. A little later, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, leaving them in the shadows that were so their leaving them in the shadows that were the precursor to the night. The sound was heard of horse hooves coming down the trail. The whole band came to alert. While it was obviously only one person. That did not mean that there was no danger at all. What finally came into view was a peasant riding a bareback on what was obviously a plow horse. When he saw them, the man hauled back to them on the makeshift rope bridle, slowing the horse to a stop. For a moment, it seemed almost as though he would wheel the horse and flee. Then he gathered his courage and spoke. "You set up a camp, sirs? Would you mind if I join you?" "Come ahead, by all means," answered Carnutran, "and welcome." Still a little wary of the rough-looking group of armed strangers, the farmer tied his horse. "Fair weather for traveling," he commented as he joined them. It was much safer. It was a much safer comment in It was a much safer comment in such company than asking what they did for a living. "It is indeed," answered Carnutran. "And did you go far?" "As far as need be," answered the farmer. "There's a troll taken up his home next to our village, and I'm seeking someone to rid us of the beast. You have to go so far as Finich." He made it sound as though Finich were synonymous with the end of the earth. Killis Doe broke into a grin and looked at Beckel. "A sign! Yea, verily, a sign, very sooth." He looked at her and sighed. At the very least, a fortuitous circumstance. The farmer was looking from one to the other in puzzlement. Carnutran bowed to the farmer. "You need go no further," he said. "You see before you one of the better bands of Trollhunters in these parts." Dervishabelle chuckled. "Why not the best, Carnutran?" He raised his eyebrows at her, then smiled broadly. "Well, there might just be another band somewhere that near I know nothing about." The farmer scowled. "I don't need mockery, sirs. My village has a sore bad problem." Carnutran turned serious. "No mockery of you was intended, sir. And I do not mock, nor do I jest when I say we are no mean troll hunters. How much does your village offer to be rid of this beast?" Dun dun dun. And then at the end, November 23rd, 1998. That is when the story was originally written. Well, when it was finished. Or was it? Because here is a random chapter 39. I'm going to read it, and I'm calling it a bonus chapter. Yeah. I read it because it's interesting. The flags and banners snapped in the breeze overhead. King Behemor was going forth hunting. His party included several people whom the king, for political reasons, had invited along, as well as several people who had managed to get themselves invited in order to bolster their own importance, along with various grooms, servants, bodyguards, and huntsmen. The huntsmen were a little grim. It was their task to see to it that the king had some hunting. And this overlarge, over-noisy, over-colored group would likely frighten any game within miles. Worse still, the king was wearing brown today, and the huntsman knew as well as any what that meant about his mood. The band was trotting up toward the main gate when a disturbance appeared ahead of them. Fenware's bodyguard closed in around him, hard eyes looking for anything that might endanger their lord. But there did not appear to be any immediate danger. What there was a small knot of young people bearing banners. Young people with grim looks on their earnest young faces. The banners were written in a very scribal Rahitan, and they said, among their other things, "Stop the slaughter and ecology now." "What is it?" demanded the king. "Lord," answered the chief of the bodyguard, "it seems to be a crowd of students." "If they're students, why are they not studying instead of blocking the streets?" The chief of the bodyguard did not bother responding to that. He knew his king too well. Instead, he rode forward and said, "You lot, you're blocking the street, and our lord king is riding out hunting. Move off." A spokesperson for the students stepped forward. "We wish to speak to the king." The chief knew that the students were generally sons and daughters of the more powerful people in the regime, and it would not simply do to ride them under. He did what his second of choice what he did what was his second choice of action, passing responsibility on to somebody else. He rode back to the king. "Lord, they wish to speak to you." The king sighed. He knew as well as the chief of his bodyguard who these brats belonged to. "All right then, I'll go talk to them." The chief of the bodyguard signaled for several of his men to accompany him with the king. "What do you want?" the king demanded the king of the students. "Why aren't you doing something useful instead of blocking the streets like this?" The spokesperson quailed a little bit in the face of the king's obvious displeasure, but rallied himself. "Lord, we are a group who call themselves Friends of the Troll. It has come to our attention that dozens of trolls are being slaughtered in the uplands every year. This can this cannot but have serious effects on the ecology of the region." "What?" The king himself was caught off guard. Demands for more freedoms in the city, more say by the citizens in the running of the city, these were things he had faced in his time. "Yes, Lord," the spokesperson, gaining more courage, pulled out of several scrolls from inside his tunic. His bodyguards tensed, then relaxed as they realized that these were not weapons. "See, Lord, we have these several studies from scholars showing what has been happening and demonstrating the tragedy which awaits us if this continues. We also have some petitions here showing the support for our cause." The king stared at him with smoldering eyes. Without turning his head, he shouted, "Handers do!" A tall, slim, pale man on a slim, pale horse pushed forward. "Yes, Lord?" "Take these papers, study them at your leisure, and if they seem to you to have any merit, set up a royal commission to study them." "Yes, Lord." Handers do collected the scrolls, stowed them away, and rode back to his place. Quietly, the students pulled themselves to the sides of the street, and King Behemor went on with his hunting. Okay, so yeah, that is chapter 39. I mean, in many words, it kind of sounds like it's another story. And like my mind just goes bing, 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 bing. I have all kinds of ideas for this to finish off. Obviously, in my mind, we have the story. The story was 1-ish to 20 or thereabouts, 1 to 19, however you want to put it. There will be a chapter 10. I promise it's chapter 10. So, yes, 1 to 20. I just have to rewrite chapter 10. But having said that, like chapter 39 is a story that happens a little bit later. Like either the second or third story. Now, one of the things I noticed is that this story, like all good fantasy stories, has a map. Whoops. Always weird when you're trying to like show it to a camera. Anyway, this is the original map that my dad drew, and I was originally commissioned to do a map for him, and it is what it is. I can do much better, and I will do much better. But yeah. So when I saw this, I thought it was potentially part of this world, this map. I mean, you can see how there's like a similarity. Whoops, there you go. Where there's like that little straight, and there's like a little straight here as well. So, when you like look at them closer, because there's like a whole bunch of cities there. Like this is like an expanded version of the map. But if you like pull it in, and you can pull it in huge, there's like a bunch of cities here, and they don't line up with the cities here. So it's a different, may not be necessarily a different world. Because I feel like it's the same world, just like if you look at the full map of this, which I haven't shown anybody. I think I showed it when I was doing Saga of Harem, because that's where this map is from. I was wondering if it was set in the same world. It could be set in the same world, but just on a different continent. There's a couple of continents that are displayed in the Saga of Harem. This one is obviously set in a different set of continents, and I am excited to kind of put them into a big world map and have them be in the same. Because the stories feel like they're set in the same world. Just different regions have different creatures, like where the Saga of Harem is set. There's lots of goblins. Goblins are the big thing. And then here in Tenara, that's the other confusing part. It's kind of like Kansas City, Kansas. There's Tenara, the city, and then there's Tenara, the region. Like, well, the kingdom, kind of, which is really, really confusing. And yeah, but I mean, like I said, we've got Kansas City in Kansas. And I'm pretty sure there's Kansas capital. I don't know. I'm not from the US. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm sorry, people. But I do know there's things like that where that happens. You can see it happening in our world. So why wouldn't it happen in someone else's world? But with that, I am really, really, really happy and excited because I love this story. I really do. Like it's for me. I had a lot of fun reading it. I love the journey. I hope you guys did too. I am going to be editing that in the next little while. I just have to finish up my other editing project first. So as you can tell, I'm losing my voice, so I'm not going to stay on much longer. But that brings me to the next part, because this is my last chapter and I'm wrapping up now. It means that I'm going to be taking some time off. Now, I have some personal things that are happening. And so basically what it is I have a small convention I have to get ready for. And then by the time that happens, I have some other personal stuff that's happening where my partner is going to be. It's a long story, but anyway, personal stuff that's gonna push everything. So I'm probably gonna be gone until, and I'm just trying to like put in the math right now for that. I would look at it on my calendar. Oh, wait, hold on here. Do. Hold on. I'm being silly. I'm gonna see if that's gonna break my laptop. It feels like it might. Okay. So let's see here. Um, okay. Mm. Sorry, I'm just trying to do math here. Yeah, we're looking at possibly, yeah, we're looking at probably starting at the end of March, or yeah, the end of March. Um, is probably going to be like literally March 31st is when I'm looking at starting up again, the soonest. I'm gonna start doing. I'll do shorts when I'm ready. I might need to push it off even further though because I have a small convention in March, and then in May I'm going away again. So I need to have all my products together. So whatever I don't get done in March, I have to have done in April. So that, which means I have to like really, 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 yeah, I have like a lot of work to get done, which doesn't get done when I'm doing my streaming. So it if I come back to it sooner, it's going to be a shorter schedule where I'm not going to be doing it every single night. But we're going to see. I'll see where that goes. I will keep in touch with everybody. I at the very least what I'll end up doing, not this week, but potentially the week after. So like after March, after March 6th, um, March 7th, I might give an update. There you go. March 7th, I'll give an update to let you guys know, kind of like a little where I'm just sitting here chatty, letting you know what's happening. And then, because that way I'll know better what's going on by that point. Um, yeah. And I kind of am thinking I'm kind of either going to be what I might just do is like maybe once or twice a week, just sort of come in and say hi and stuff like that and let you know what's going on. Maybe even like read a chapter or something of something short because I have some short stories I can read as well. Maybe, maybe that'll happen. That sounds like a good idea. Sure, we can do that. So yeah, now I'm just babbling and I'm slowly losing my voice. So I'm gonna let you guys all go. And I will talk to everybody on March 7th. Okay? Talk to you then. Bye.